Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, we have Matt Fisher from the Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern Railroad. Thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
So tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I've been working for the Reading and Northern Railroad for 16 years now in the passenger department. The Reading and Northern Railroad's passenger department now has been around for over 35 years. I'm basically between the 50, 60 some employees in the middle of the seniority list. If you would look at that, there's a lot of people that have been around for even more time here at the Reading and Northern. I started off as a car host on the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway, which was part of the Reading and Northern Railroad at the time, up in Jim Thorpe in 2005. And I became a conductor, narrator, ticket agent, and then eventually started working for the Reading Northern Railroad in the passenger department full-time about 6 years ago. Did at first marketing, public relations for the passenger department. And for the last 5 years now, I've been the general manager of the passenger department here at the railroad.
That's you've kind of got to try out everything before you started working as the manager.
Right. Yeah. I did almost all the different jobs. I'm not qualified to be an engineer yet, but I hope to get the engineer license here soon.
Okay. So what drew you into trains or?
Well, I think that people are sometimes born with this hobby. I know it definitely ran on my father's side of the family. I have a cousin that's likes trains. My dad used to collect trains as a young man and as a boy with his father. And at first I started with a O-scale set in my basement, and enjoy going out and seeing the rail trains, and then eventually go to different train shows and different railroads to ride different trains. I rode the Reading Northern Railroad, which at the time was called the Blue Mountain Reading Railroad in the 80s, and rode on a lot of the trains that I now manage today.
Oh, very, very cool. And I'm just kind of curious, do the passenger trains still go into Reading or no? Is it just called that?
The passenger trains start in Muhlenberg Township, just north of Reading, at the intersections of Route 61 and Bellevue Avenue. That's where the new Reading Outer Station is located. And it's basically a nod to the original Reading Outer Station that was built in the 1870s, which was in downtown Reading.
We probably, it's almost 10 years ago now, we helped restore the Franklin Street Station.
Oh, great, yeah.
Yeah, so, but I don't think there's a train that goes past there now anymore.
There are freight trains go by there. That's now Norfolk Southern Railroad. It's not the Reading Northern Railroad at that point. But again, Franklin Street is less than a mile away from where the outer station is on the Reading Northern Railroad. That's basically the southern tip of the Reading and Northern Railroad, which is over 300 miles.
Oh my goodness.
Primarily freight. That's where most of the business is done on the freight end of the railroad. But again, the Reading Northern is unique for having its own passenger department that offers day trips, and then the tourist portion, which is basically related to Jim Thorpe with the Lehigh Gorge
Right.
scenic train trips into the
Yeah.
Lehigh Gorge State Park.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me into my next question. So tell me about the Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern Railroad, the history, some of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
The Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern, it's also known as the Reading and Northern Railroad.
Okay.
It's almost like the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. Most people would say it's Santa Fe. It's the same
Right.
railroad.
Right.
So the Reading Northern Railroad has been owned by Andy Muller Jr. He's the founder and owner of the railroad. Like I said briefly, it started as the Blue Mountain and Reading in 1983 between Temple and South Hamburg, Pennsylvania. There were a couple of freight customers that were originally served, and then Mr. Muller got into the passenger business by 1985. It's been our 35th year in passenger. By 1990, the what's known as the Reading Cluster became available. Conrail owned it. Mr. Muller went to Conrail and was successful in buying it. And the Reading Cluster went from Reading, Pennsylvania, on the former Reading Railroad, the west side of the Schuylkill River going through Hamburg, and pretty much all the railroad assets in Schuylkill County were part of the Reading Cluster going towards Northumberland, Mount Carmel area. In 1996, the Reading Northern purchased the Lehigh side of the railroad from Lehighton, Jim Thorpe up through the Lehigh Gorge into the Wilkes-Barre, Pittston, Scranton area to a place called Mahoopany. There's a big paper company, Procter and Gamble, is located up there, a big customer of ours. So the railroad basically goes from Reading to the P&G plant up in Mahoopany. And in the years since, we've also purchased different things. One of the highlights was a few years ago, the Humboldt Industrial Park railroad trackage, which is just west of Hazleton on the I-80 corridor, 81 corridor. And we are always growing here. And the passenger department grew from being just those few miles from Temple to South Hamburg, and eventually by 2005, Mr. Muller created the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway in Jim Thorpe, and the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway ran through last year, 2019. We pulled briefly out of Jim Thorpe and came back as the Reading Northern Passenger. Then this year, August 14th, we started running trains again in Jim Thorpe.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
And we also do have trains not only in Jim Thorpe, but we have all-day trips going from the Reading Outer Station to Jim Thorpe. Sometimes we do charter trains from the northern part of the railroad, the Tunkhannock, Mountaintop, Duryea, Pittston areas.
Yeah, I was looking at some of your historic passenger cars on the website yesterday when I was prepping, and I saw that you had some. I think they were the Pullman that had like the glass on top.
Oh yes.
And I see that those were like for not, I don't know if it was for charter, but that like for that somebody could rent it for a private excursion.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
interesting thing
Yeah.
is we can do charter trains.
Mhm.
We do charters sometimes. However, a lot of times we'll add some of those cars that are considered our private car fleet.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll add those cars on the back end of a general public train.
Yes.
For example, in October, we did 2 trains from Reading Outer Station to Jim Thorpe, and there was one Pullman car that actually has individual rooms.
Yes. Yeah.
And then there's the dome car, which you were mentioning
Yeah.
with the glass top.
Yeah.
That's a full dome car, and that was available as well. Actually, the dome car right now for the Santa trains out of Reading Outer Station has the dome car on as well, and it's only $25 per person. So there's a big difference when it comes to the different trips we offer for the territory, the amount of time. For example, the Santa train, it's $25 per ticket. It's a 70-minute trip. A lot of times the dome car is priced near $200 for an all-day trip if it's
Right.
going towards Jim Thorpe. And
Especially during the fall foliage.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
that makes sense to me. So tell me a little bit about the historic passenger cars. Were they? I'm assuming since you started the passenger line started in the mid '80s, that you've had to acquire most of those from places, or?
Yeah, we did get those cars from various
Hmm.
locations. Out of the private car fleet, we have traditional Pullman, which was built in the 1920s by the Pullman company in Chicago. That was set up for both day and nighttime running, and it was built for the New Haven Railroad. It has 10 individual rooms. It has a common area, and it has a kitchen and a restroom area on that car. Um, the Pullman was the luxurious brand of the time. That would be the first class type riding in the 19 teens all the way up through into the 1950s.
Right.
The Pullman car is set up for daytime use because we don't do any overnight
Yeah.
trips as of right now on the Reading Northern. And we didn't do too much work to that. A lot of the
Hmm.
original
Was there?
electrical,
Hmm.
when it comes to the original uh, mechanical things of that car, are pretty much still intact
Yeah.
on that car. You mentioned that we have a dome car as well, and the dome car was one of the first full dome cars built. And what I mean by there's full dome car meaning the whole roof looks like it has glass on
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
That's what would be considered a full dome. And it was built for the Milwaukee Road. The Milwaukee Road had their dominance between Chicago, Wisconsin, into the Twin Cities, but
Hmm.
they also had transcontinental line from Chicago all the way out to Washington State.
Okay.
And those cars, there's only a handful of those full dome cars built in the early 1950s for the Milwaukee. And that went on their transcontinental train over the Rockies,
Hmm.
and it must have been beautiful views
Oh,
because
yes.
when you're in that car, you look up and you can see everything around you. And I could only imagine taking it through the
Yeah.
Rockies, through Montana, and places like that.
That would be beautiful.
It has basically two levels. It has the upper level that has 44 seats, very comfortable seats in the top, again with the glass ceiling. And in the bottom level, it has a full kitchen, which we just spent a lot of money putting back the kitchen into that car. And it also has a dining area where there's several tables. It looks like you're in a diner from the 1950s
Mm.
era. And there's a couple windows that you can gaze out at when you're eating food down the bottom level. So it's a great car to take a whole all day trip
Mhm.
over the railroad. We also have self-propelled rail diesel cars, and they're not part of our private cars, but they're considered rail diesel cars. And they were quite popular in the 1950s, all the way through the 1980s for commuter service. The Reading Railroad, before the Reading Northern, used these cars between various places on the Reading system.
Mhm.
Uh, Most people in the Schuylkill County area, which we're here in the Schuylkill Haven Station,
Mhm.
many people here remember the RDC cars going from Pottsville down to Reading in commuter service. We have three of those RDCs, and one of them is set up where it has a kitchen dining area. We have a snack counter. We serve snacks and sodas and drinks, and there's also some seating there. And then the other two RDCs are full coaches, and they seat about 88 to 90 people.
Oh, that's a lot of people.
And a lot of people are interested in this, especially there's a lot of people anymore that don't know too much about trains. When we originally started running them, back in 2014, we reintroduced them in the service. We were starting to get some calls. People were saying, "Hey, those passenger cars ran away on you." And had to explain nicely that
Right.
they're self-propelled. There's two Detroit diesel engines that are
Yeah.
a little over 300 horsepower underneath the actual cars, and then the engineer stays in the vestibule area. And they're very versatile because instead of having to use a turntable or totally wide the train
To
to face it
turn.
the
Oh,
other
yeah.
way,
You
the
can just
engineer just takes a couple
back
levers and
go
then he'll go to
reverse.
the other end. Yeah, he could reverse, or he could
Yeah.
just go to the other vestibule on the other end and change ends, hit a
Oh
couple
my
switches,
goodness.
and
Yeah.
then you're off to the races. So
That
yeah,
makes it, I'm sure, much more efficient. Yeah.
absolutely, it does. And when we have trains where we don't need a full train set for like 6, 7, 800 people, when
Hmm.
we only have 100 or 200 people, it's very economical. When we
Oh, yeah.
have an engineer, conductor, maybe someone in the snack counter or a car host,
Right.
and we run those RDCs quite often from the Reading area to Jim Thorpe. through off seasons like in spring,
Yeah.
summer, and winter. During the fall, we'll run the whole train. We also have a few other cars. We have what's called our parlor car, which is on display right now in Port Clinton, and it has 13 beautiful seats. We have a tin roof on it, beautiful carpeting. It has two fireplace inserts on it. And basically, the owner's wife, Carol Muller, had an idea what she wanted to make as a car that's in the private consist. A
Okay.
lot of times, Andy and Carol take their train out where it's just them or their family. And
Mhm.
we call it an office car special.
Okay.
Sometimes the top brass of the railroad will look the railroad over with these OCS trains. Sometimes we invite freight customers. We have many freight customers on the
Right.
railroad
Mhm.
for a day out on the railroad to check the railroad out. And this parlor car was pretty much in private service. Now and again, it's open to the public. But again, it's a beautiful car where we took a picture of the interior of a Pullman car from the 1920s. We only had one picture to go on, and we have fantastic employees, over 200 employees. We have over 50 part-time and full-time people in the passenger department alone.
Right.
And we also have a lot of contractors that come in anywhere from HVAC, plumber, to people that will be basically focusing on steam locomotive repair.
Mhm.
And we have all kinds of carpenters and electricians as well. And they come in and they'll do contract work for us. And we took one picture and it was amazing. We got the interior of the car to look very similar to what a car
Oh,
similar
very
would have
cool.
looked like in
Yeah.
the 1920s.
Yeah, um, that's really fun. Do you do a lot of that work then in-house?
Yes, we
Okay.
do almost all the work in-house, at least when it comes to the restoration of the cars.
Mhm.
Even when the cars need maintenance, like brake work, wheel work, the trucks are what the wheels set on,
Mhm.
truck work. We'll do all that stuff
Okay.
in-house
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Um,
That's really I think that's important too because I think that training people to be able to do this work is important. We worked probably about the same time we were working at Franklin Street. We redid the clear story windows at Steamtown at one of locomotive machine shops,
uh,
and my husband commented that like all the people in there working were probably at least close to retirement age, and he's
yeah.
like, so who's going to keep doing this work, you know? And so I'm glad to hear that you're doing, you know, you do it in house, so you have people trained to be able to do that.
And it's
Yeah,
generational because
yeah,
we went through. Originally, Mr. Muller had many people that worked from the Reading Railroad, and they were hired on
hmm
in the early 1900s. They
right,
worked with steam in these passenger
yeah,
trains. They knew a lot when he was getting into the business in the early 1980s. Obviously, all those people have passed away
right,
since then, but it's generational, and there's some families that have been with us since the beginning. A lot of the people that were 18, 19 years old are near retirement age
right,
already,
yeah,
and we're going on to the next generation after that. And it's something that, especially with our steam engine, it's just not, you're not going to find someone just down the street that has this knowledge. You're not going to get a lot of these parts, obviously, off the shelves in stock somewhere. A lot of this, you actually have to machine yourself.
right,
Same with the passenger equipment. It's much different than the national freight network that these freight cars go.
right,
A lot of the equipment
because
is
that's
different.
standardized.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And so it takes a knack, it takes a lot of learning and patience, but we do have a very strong team around us to help us maintain and preserve this. And I do want to mention the pride and joy of the railroad in the private car fleet is Car One. That's the Black Diamond. That was built for Jay Gould's daughter. Many, I'm sure, of your listeners would know Jay Gould was a railroad tycoon in the 1800s and known for a lot of his competition against the Vanderbilts. He almost got a transcontinental railroad from the Atlantic to the Pacific Oceans, but didn't in his tenure. And back in the 1800s, the Lear jets, if you will, the time were these private cars.
Mhm.
And Car One has an observation area on the back. Um, Usually we put it on the back end of the office car specials, or even the fall foliage trains you might see on the back end of that. It has a full kitchen. It It has a full dining area. It has a porter room for when there will be a porter on the
Right.
train at that time. It has 3 bedrooms. It has a shower. It has 2 restrooms, and it has a nice area that's basically the parlor area that's attached to the back platform. Um, Mr. Muller found that in the Wilkes-Barre area in the mid 1990s and bought it. A lot of the original furnishings are the same, or they were replaced by the best craftsmen of the time,
Mhm.
and the electrical is pretty much the same as it was when it got its update in the 1920s.
Oh goodness, yeah.
There's stained glass windows in it, and it was built in all the way back in the late 1880s.
Oh, that's very cool.
So that by far is the oldest car in the fleet. It actually is wooden with a iron frame underneath it, which of course today everything else in our fleet is steel. Everything is steel in it,
Right.
but this car is still made in a wooden
Yeah.
frame.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. Does that require then more maintenance, or is it still?
Well, yeah, we keep that at our train shed in our corporate headquarters at Port Clinton.
Okay.
And we actually keep that connected to what we call house power. It always has electric to it because we keep water in it at all times.
Oh, so it won't
And
rust.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
and that doesn't freeze, and we have
Yeah.
issues with the pipes. And so that can go out whenever the owner, Mr. Muller, would want it out on the railroad. It's a beautiful piece of preservation, and there are very few cars that are that old that are.
That are almost original.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Um, well, is there anything else that you wanted to share with me about the trains or the fleet?
Sure.
Or yeah.
Yeah, there's the standard cars have about 70 seats, and they were built as early as 1917 for the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad. And they were built for commuter service originally in North Jersey between Hoboken, which was the DL&W's main terminal, which is now New Jersey Transit's terminal.
Okay.
And it would go from Hoboken towards North Jersey points all the way towards Delaware Water Gap. And these commuter cars were sometimes called the Edison cars because there was an electric and then there was a trailing car that was not electric. These cars were actually electrified at one point. And Thomas Edison was the first person to actually
Right.
drive one of these,
Oh goodness.
to run one
Yeah.
of these when they first came out in 1917. Because it was one of the first times that electricity was used to power trains. And they've survived through commuter service into the New Jersey Transit era. And in the mid 1980s, Mr. Muller purchased those. We currently have 9 of them that are used as standard coaches, and we're starting to refurbish them. And then the 10th one was Mr. Muller's original private car, which is here in Schuylkill Haven. And that one is put in the office car special fleet. And then we also have several that were built in the 1930s, 1932 by Bethlehem Steel. Most of them were built for the Reading Railroad. And I believe we have 7 or 8 of those that are still standard coaches. One of them is here in Schuylkill Haven as well. These are primarily the cars that people will ride in when they go to the Lehigh Gorge trains, or if they use standard coach seating on any of our other offerings. And they have seats that have been updated since, but a lot of people like them because A, the windows open and shut.
Right.
And people really obviously enjoy them in the summer. They don't have air conditioning in these cars. So once you get moving, you get a nice breeze from the,
Yeah, it's not terrible. Yeah.
certainly from the Lehigh Gorge. Back when they used to promote in the 1800s, Ma Chunk, which is now Jim Thorpe,
Oh yeah.
they used to say, take an air bath. Well, in this case, you get an air bath here going into the beautiful Lehigh Gorge. But so they still have windows that are functional, that open and shut. And also the seats, you can actually push or pull the middle of the seats to face the opposite direction. So there's a lot of versatility if you want to have a family of 4 seating facing each other, or if you simply don't want to ride backwards.
Right.
You can just flip the seat and then ride the other way. So we have over 15 of those standard cars, and we have 3 cars that were originally enclosed, but we tore out the sides of the cars. We still have the roof on the top, and then we put in the bench in the middle, and now it's open on the sides, and we consider those our open air cars. and they're very popular up on the Lehigh Gorge trains as well. The open air car price is a little bit higher than the standard car price because people can actually get up out of their seat and stand up against the railing and the openness of the car
Yeah.
and take better pictures and see more around them. And of course, they're very popular in the summertime as well.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
They have beautiful murals. Some of them we painted murals on the top of them. The rail diesel cars, we have murals on the top of them as well. It looks like a sky, a blue sky with some white clouds and some geese and hawks and different birds.
Uh-huh.
We have a lot of work done with artists. Primarily, we use a person named John Bond, and he has his Bond art at Kempton. He's been doing murals and painting with us since the 1980s. And we have some other people as well that help us out to make it look as appealing as possible.
Right.
We have a whole painter gang of people that will keep painting the interiors and keeping things fresh, but also painting things along the railroad. We take great pride in our right of way to keep it clean. And if we see something like graffiti or things that are
Try to
graffiti
keep
on,
that,
on
yeah.
our railroad cars or
Right.
freight cars,
Yeah.
we
Yeah, I'm
immediately
su-
have
yeah.
some painted.
I'm sure that's a big job to stay on top of.
Mm. Yeah, so today we're doing the recording here at Schuylkill Haven Station. The passenger department has its main headquarters here at Schuylkill Haven. It's in the beautiful Philadelphia and Reading Stone Station on 12 West Main Street here in Schuylkill Haven. And it was the second station to be in this place. Originally, there was a station built by the Philadelphia and Reading in the mid 1800s. And the interesting thing about this station, which was built at the turn of the last century, it was finished by 1902, is that if you go into the basement, you can actually see the original footprint
Of the first.
Yeah,
of the first
exactly.
station.
And when we purchased this from the Schuylkill Haven Borough a few years back, they said, "Hey, let's take you down in the basement. There's actually a part that there's a crawl space in, and it has the dirt, and there's this tree stump,
Oh.
and it looks like the tree was cut down just yesterday. It's basically preserved down
Yeah.
there. For whatever reason, they didn't rip out the tree stump, which that tree was originally next to the original first station, and they just put the crawl space of the new station right over top.
Oh goodness.
And when they built this over 100, almost 120 years ago, the stonework, some of it comes from the original railroads in this location that date back all the way into the 1820s, where they were chartered. Back then as early. There's the Mine Hill Railroad, the Little Schuylkill Railroad, which is towards Tamaqua area that went to Port Clinton. But the lineage of our railroads, which later became the Reading and then Conrail and then the Reading and Northern Railroad, is amazing. It's almost 200 years old already. Some of the stone from Schuylkill Haven was on the original Mine Hill Railroad, and it was put into the fireplace here. So some of that stone's actually nearly 200 years old and been on the railroad for that long. The town, the borough of Schuylkill Haven, purchased this station from Conrail in 1989, and they had the foresight back then to not rip it down. Unfortunately, a lot of municipalities would sell it to a privately held company, and they didn't have any use for it, they destroy it,
Right.
or they themselves, the community, would rip it down. We're very lucky to have Schuylkill Haven Station here, and they made it actually their offices. For the police department one time was here,
Okay.
and all their people that dealt with the utilities, and the borough manager had his office here. And one day we came in here because we do Schuylkill Haven Borough Days, which is a Saturday in September. Very popular day here in Schuylkill Haven. We run trains here. And we were starting to run Santa trains back in 2014, 2015 in the Schuylkill County area, Schuylkill Haven, Minersville, Pottsville, Tamaqua. And we didn't want to have a card table set up to sell tickets
Right.
outside. In September works out fine.
Right.
But so we decided to talk to some people here in town that we coordinate the trips with, and we said, "Do you have any connections?" And they connected us to Scott Graver, who is the borough manager here at Schuylkill Haven. And we came into the station here and we asked, uh, we don't want to sit outside in the cold. Can we just stay here in the vestibule area and sell
Mhm.
tickets? We won't cause any issue here. We'll put everything back the way it was. And
Right.
then Scott said, do you want to buy it? And we said, we'll get right back to you. So we made a deal with the borough. They bought what was a bank out on Route 61, which is more traveled than here on
Right.
Main Street in downtown. And they moved their offices to what was that former bank along Schuylkill Havens, Route 61. And then we purchased the station outright, and Port Clinton, our headquarters, was running out of room, and we needed somewhere to put our passenger department. At one time, we had 5 people in one office.
Right.
Couldn't
That
fit.
gets tight. Yeah.
Very tight. But long story short, we came up here to Schuylkill Haven, and a lot of the bullnosing and wainscoting,
Mhm.
a lot of that stuff is still original.
Oh yes.
And they put smaller offices, but they didn't mess with any of the original
Right.
parts of the interior. And we easily were able to take out those offices that were built in the 1980s and 90s
For the
to open it
township.
back
Yeah.
up again. Yeah, so we opened up most of what it looks like. And again, it's very hard when you preserve things with railroad stations where you have thousands of pictures taken outside of any railroad
Right.
station.
But not usually of the interior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because for whatever reason, people would just, I guess, do their business and stay for a few minutes in the waiting area and then go.
Right.
We only could find literally one picture from the Philadelphia and Reading's photographer back in the 19 teens.
Oh goodness.
And we took the picture, and we basically, again, like we did for car 3, to have that parlor car redone,
Yeah.
we just focused everything on the picture. And I'll show you that as
Oh,
well.
definitely.
It's so amazing how we got it to look almost exactly from the light fixtures to the way everything's displayed in the waiting area. This was one of the bigger stations on the Reading. It was a mid-sized station, I would say, but it had restrooms. It actually had a place where we call it an infirmary, where if there was someone sick on the railroad, passenger or employee could come here at one point.
Okay.
This was actually the dispatching office. The dispatcher basically runs and controls the railroad, where they can throw electric switches, 30 miles away. And in this room, which is my office now, at the bay window of Schuylkill Haven Station, the person actually controlled all the switches from Pottsville down through Port Clinton at one time. And there's actually switches for the Buck Hill Tunnel, which is a huge, long tunnel over a mile long. That goes, it's between Monomoy City and Barnesville,
Okay.
for people that are familiar with that. And it was such a long tunnel that the steam engines would get all kinds of smoke and cinder, and
Oh yeah.
so they had to actually have fans. So they had a fan system, and the person here in this room would be able to switch that on and off. So it's quite amazing how it, over the years, served the general public, but then
Right.
it was regional office here, if you will, for the dispatcher. And then it became the towns. And we've went to great detail. We're lucky that there are other stations along the way, along a railroad, that are still around. Like, for
Yes.
example, Minersville still has the station. Reading Northern owns it, and we lease it out to Project 113. Project 113 is a great thing for your listeners to look into. They have a functioning steam locomotive. It's the only steam locomotive in the country that can be powered exclusively by anthracite coal.
Oh really?
Almost all of our, including our steam engines, are bituminous fed. And that steam engine's up at Minersville, and we run trains quite often out of there. We also have an original station in Jim Thorpe. Carbon County owns that, but that's basically the focal point of where the Lehigh Gorge trains start. That was a beautiful, it is a beautiful station built in 1888 by the Wilson brothers of Philadelphia. They also have many different structures in the Philadelphia area, specifically churches and some public buildings that they built in their time. There's also Tamaqua Station, was built the same year the original Reading Outer Station was built in 1874. Tamaqua Station is a miracle that it survived. There's a nonprofit group called Save Our Station, which still owns Tamaqua Station. We own the railroad track against them. We actually redid the platform. We spent tens of thousands of dollars to make a nice functional platform in front of the station. But anyway, Save Our Station put over $1 million into the Tamaqua Station, where it is lucky that that even exists.
Right.
And they reintroduced that to the public in the mid 2000s, and now is housing a restaurant, a beautiful restaurant, the Tamaqua Station restaurant, gets rave reviews. And some of the people that were involved with Save Our Station when we were starting to renovate Schuylkill Haven 3 or 4 years ago, we went over there and we went to the great detail to get actual color paint.
Uh-huh.
Right. The Reading used different variations of green and yellow and some brown.
Okay.
And we actually went into a very deep corner in the bottom of a closet in the Tamaqua Station, and we found a paint chip. And it was the original green from the Tamaqua Station, and we were able to match as close as possible.
Oh, yes.
And that's where the green walls come from in the interior of Schuylkill Haven. It's
Yeah.
the original Reading color. And then we matched the browns and the yellows and tans as much as we could as well to make it look Reading Railroad-like from
Right.
the 1920s.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, it's funny sometimes you'll be working on something and you'll find like as you get layers and layers down, the different colors and things, and or something that nobody thought to paint, like the closet, then you find out what it really looks like.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then when you get it, as everybody knows, when you are restoring something like this, you get into something and you think, okay, it's going to be easy.
Oh no.
It's not. Or sometimes maybe you look out and it is.
Yeah, there are times.
There are
But
times,
yeah, I was joking about that, like usually it's projects at my house, like I'm like, oh, this will be so easy, and then it never is. It never goes the way I vision it
Yeah,
should.
exactly. That can be with the railroad cars too.
Yes.
So,
So, well, it sounds like the railroad is really working hard to preserve not just all of the railroad history, not just the train cars, but the buildings that are associated also,
Absolutely.
which is an important part of the train history.
Yeah.
Of the railroad history, yes.
We actually have this book from the Reading Company. We get it down to the signs.
Oh,
we have
very
the same
cool.
color background and the same lettering. We have it, for example, our maintenance and way department, which does all the maintenance to the railroad tracks. They know when it comes to signs, they need to be 10 feet away from the railroad track and 10 feet high.
Yeah.
That's how high the post is. And we have these books, the Reading Railroad.
Standardized everything.
Yeah, basically, this is a book from the 1920s, actually, from all these, from fencing to signs to the way buildings look. We built actually a few places to make look like back a days of yore,
Yes.
Reading Outer Station, again, we mentioned earlier, it's not the original place because we don't own that railroad in downtown Reading. That's Norfolk
Right.
Southern. We do own in Muhlenberg Township, however, and we were able to buy the property along Route 61. Very few places along the Reading area, the railroad grade is not the same as the highway grade.
Oh, yeah.
So we had a big issue where, it's only along the railroad in the Reading area for so much, and then it goes into basically farmland, crosses the Schuylkill River.
Yeah.
And we were trying to find for years a place that was close to a main highway, and we finally found that at Bellevue and Route 61. So we were able to purchase two different properties there. And then there's plenty of free parking for the people that take the trip. But we also built a tower there, which is where our new Reading Outer Station is. And we made that look to be similar to a tower that was built for the Pennsylvania Railroad across the Susquehanna River from Harrisburg.
Okay.
That was built in the mid-1800s. And that tower was actually moved to Strasburg Railroad in Strasburg, Pennsylvania.
Right.
And it looks exactly like it. We have, again, great staff, contractors, vice presidents that will get the detail, we'll get the job out and bid it out, and then we'll actually build these buildings. We built that outer station in less than a year. It's about 4 years old now. We're looking to extend and build other places. For example, our signal department for the railroad signals is in West Cressona. The original station is where their offices are, but we built a pole building next to it to make it look similar to what buildings would back then. For their signal equipment, we're looking to build more buildings in the passenger department as well.
Yeah. Very, very. Yeah, I think that definitely there's a the oh, I can't think what word I want to use. The drive to preserve has to come from the leadership, and then
Yes.
because if that's not a priority, it doesn't get done. Because oftentimes, and I'm sure you know this, it doesn't make sense financially. It's a labor of love.
It
Yeah.
is. And that's basically the passenger department.
Right.
The passenger department at the Reading Northern Railroad, it's very labor intensive
Hmm.
and it makes very little money.
Right.
We do make money in the passenger department, which we're one of very few tourist railroads in the country that does make money.
Right.
But again, it's labor of love, as the owner of the railroad has said. Now, he's always been interested in trains, and he started his career off as a public school teacher, and then he got into precious metals,
Okay.
and he became owner of what was called the F&F shop in downtown Hamburg. And then he originally got the line from Temple to South Hamburg in 1983. So he's always had this. He loves coins, and
Right.
in history when it comes to that,
Hmm.
and with the railroad background and wanting to preserve things and share it with the rest of the
Right.
general public,
Yeah.
it's quite the feat, and you don't see too many railroads that do
No,
that.
yeah, no, it's very impressive. I'm glad that I got to come up here and and see everything and meet you. Tell me what trends or challenges do you see in railroads or train preservation?
Sure. Again, we touched a little bit about it. When
Yeah,
you want to do it right, you want to make it look the way it was for people not only to reminisce, but to learn something as well, be
right,
educated. But again, sometimes it's very hard to get this to be exactly, when you only have one picture to go by, you don't have anyone that has that memory anymore because it's
right.
long since gone.
Yeah,
That can be difficult. When it comes to the railroad end of the actual railroad cars, a lot of these cars aren't up for sale. A lot of these cars are either so far gone that they're graffitied up and all the windows are smashed out and
right,
they're in the weeds somewhere, or they have ownership that the owners don't want to sell the cars. They
hmm,
have an attachment to them.
right,
It's hard to find what you're looking for and buy it.
hmm.
And when you do, sometimes it's halfway across the country, and then you have to pay to get it either
To
by
get
rail or
yeah.
shipped here by truck, which is even more
Oh my
expensive.
goodness, I can't imagine. Yeah,
Sometimes it's over the border in Canada as well. So it's very hard to get a good price on it, including the shipping,
right,
to get it to the railroad here in Reading, and to be able to fix it. Um, so the facilities are actually easier to replicate if we're building something and make it look like one from
right.
175 years ago. The railroad cars, not so much.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Well, is there anything that you'd like to promote to our listeners? This will go live at the end of January, so I don't know if you have any special trains over the winter, or is that mostly?
The Lehigh Gorge trains, as it looks now, will probably start running in mid-February.
Okay.
LGSRY.com is the website for the Lehigh Gorge trains out of Jim Thorpe into Lehigh Gorge State Park. That's the majority of our passenger business, but like I mentioned, we do run trains all over the railroad system, and rbmnrr-passenger.com is the website for the Reading Northern side. And we have a Reading and Northern Passenger Facebook page and a Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway Facebook page, which we update quite frequently. Sometimes we do trips that are designed for the general public, like young families, tourists, locals,
Right.
but also I definitely keep checking our websites and our Facebook because we do have these charter trains by like National Rail Historic Society groups.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
And a lot of times, again, these are chartered trips,
Right.
and there's people that are into the preservation history of the railroads in these
Mhm.
NRHS groups. And a lot of times they'll charter trains, so we'll go places that we don't usually take passenger
Yeah.
trains and do different types of things.
Oh,
We
yeah.
do what's called like rare mileage trips sometimes, where people around the country will come just to ride a portion of our railroad, which we usually don't offer
Oh, yeah.
to the public. So we do special trips like that as well.
Oh, that's very, very good to know and to we'll make sure that we have the websites and the Facebook pages on our site too, so people, if they're listening, can go and find it easy.
That's great. Thank
So,
you,
very
Danielle.
good.
And
Thank you.
it's really we're happy that a group is interested in the preservation
Yes.
part of the railroad, and we certainly welcome people to Schuylkill Haven. We have people here every day of the week, 8:30 to 5 p.m.
Okay.
And then Port Clinton is the corporate headquarters. People are welcome to come on down and visit at the main area during Monday through Friday and work hours.
Okay.
And they can actually get visitors tags as well. We're very, not just for buying a ticket, but we're also very friendly to the general public.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.